there are two major signs. Now, they can have many branches to them, but what makes people want to die, the factors that there are two psychological factors that come together, and if they do in fact come together, most people are going to want to die. Doesn't mean they'll do it, but they're going to feel the desire to at some point. And one of them is lack of belongingness. So isolation, as I mentioned, this what I think of as an epidemic of isolation and loneliness is a huge risk factor. So if you see people, truly they're isolated, truly feel like they have no one, there is no reciprocity in their relationships, they're not giving back and they're not receiving, those kinds of things, that's a really big risk factor. So you bring that together with the other factor, which is another B word, burdensomeness. When people begin to feel like a burden, meaning a burden to their loved ones, to their caregivers, to society at large, when they begin to speak in ways that betray the fact that they believe that the world would be better off without them. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear that kind of language with folks who are having suicidal thoughts. I'm a burden, I'm not worth fighting for, the isolation piece, and there's nobody's here to, nobody cares if I live or die, that sort of thing. And the pernicious part of that is when people really get suicidal, they believe that burdensomeness. In fact, they oftentimes, the calculus in their minds is that the world truly would be better off without them, including those people that love them. And of course, that's so far from the truth. And one of the things that we try to get across to people is really, who are feeling that way, is truly to see what the aftermath of a completed suicide looks to a spouse or a sibling or a child. And it is truly lifelong devastation, psychologically, emotionally, in a lot of ways. And so anyway, lack of belonging and feeling like a burden are two major risk factors. That's for who wants to die, who feels like dying. And a lot of people get there at some point in their life. I'd at least in some passive way, feel like I'd like to die. But most people who have those feelings don't do it. They don't kill themselves. There's a third factor in this research that shows it kind of takes something over time to wear down the basic biophilic love of life taboo against hurting and killing ourselves. I mean, that's so deeply ingrained in us as human beings, and it takes a long time for some people to wear that down. And the people who are most likely to do that are people who have access to lethal means, who use weapons a lot, who see a lot of mayhem and death and destruction. First responders and soldiers and so forth. But not just those folks, medical professionals, etc. So it's this idea of the burdensome and lack of belonging predicts who feels like dying, but that ability to really feel comfortable, more comfortable with lethal means and so forth, is what predicts who actually commits the act.
Are there ever physiological signs that coincide with the mental and social aspects?
Sure. Yeah, there's a real sense of, with depression, which is a huge risk factor, obviously. There's the physiological slowing. You can tell when somebody feels like they're walking through a vat of molasses, when they're depressed. It just looks like walking, looks like, trudging through life is painful for them. So there's those kinds of physiological signs. And you may have even heard that commercial for one of the antidepressants that talks about depression hurts. It really does. I mean, it goes along with chronic pain conditions, and when you're depressed for long enough, it hurts physiologically.